Thomas and Leslie, if you want to go ahead and come up to the front. Over the last few weeks of Advent, I've had the joy of letting other people help me with these, and it's been really, really good. I've enjoyed Advent. You know, as a minister, when you go through these cycles, and even though we don't follow the calendar, the Christian calendar like some churches, there are some things that as a minister you have to do over and over again. You have to talk about Christmas and you have to talk about Easter. And I've been a pastor now for 30 years, and so that's 30 Christmases and 30 Easters. And you start wondering, how in the world am I going to say anything different this time? And I think with the help of everyone who has shared over the last few weeks, I think that it has opened up our eyes and shown us another way of looking at Advent and of the Christmas year. And so just by way of review again, remember Advent has to do with coming or anticipating. And as a Christian, there's two aspects of this. We look back to the anticipation and the coming of Christ on Christmas morning. But also now we are caught in that where we are now anticipating and waiting for the coming of Christ again. And usually throughout Advent there are four themes. They don't vary too much, and so our themes for this year have let me find them here, have been hope, peace, joy, and love. And James Britton shared with us on hope and how God has given him hope to help him overcome his addiction problems. Ray Sanchez talked about peace and how God was there with her through some very, very difficult times in life and given her the peace that passes understanding. Last week, Samantha talked about joy, and this week we had a little situation at the community center, and I walked in one day and I said, "How's your joy?" And she smiled and said, "Oh, it's still there." And I was like, "All right, good," because it was kind of put to the test, right? That's how everything is in life from that. But the joy that we have, even in the waiting and even in the anticipation of what God can do. And today, it's my honor to introduce to you, you know them, Thomas and Leslie, and they're going to talk about love, and they've told me a little bit of what they're going to share, and so I'm looking forward to hearing it completely fleshed out. So, just one simple question. What is it that you think of, or how do you see this love during this time of year and how it relates to Advent?
Yeah, Kevin, when you first asked us would we share on love, we were worried it was like an underhanded way of saying we needed to study more about it.
We need to look it up and
figure it out.
Well, it wasn't underhanded at all.
Yeah, overhanded.
Oh, yeah. Then it was communicated very well. We just started talking about it, and the last 2 years of our life, we've watched our capacity for love increase through this little blonde-headed 2-year-old that you guys have seen run around. His name is Judah, and we became parents 2 years ago, and so we thought, what better way to talk about love than through this increase of love for us as parents. So a little bit of that requires you knowing a little bit of our story, and then we'll get into some of the applications, hopefully, and we won't ramble too much for time's sake. But we decided about 4 years ago we wanted to start a family, and it took us, everybody's journey to becoming parents is different, and ours was taking a little longer. We experienced a miscarriage along the way, and then at one point in 2017, I think it was in September of that year, we decided we wanted to start the process for adoption. And before Thomas and I were even dating, both of us had talked about wanting to adopt, and so when we got married, we were like, we would love to at some point make that a part of our reality. And so in September of 2017, we started all this paperwork through this organization here locally called Mercy Ministries. And they're an organization that walks alongside young women who are in need of discipleship and some redirection. And they found that women were coming in with unplanned pregnancies. And so as a means to serve them in their season of life, they began an adoption agency portion of their ministry. And something that we loved about them not only is that their heart was for these women, but it was a small organization. And so we actually thought we're going to have a lot of time as we go in this process, probably 1 or 2 years of waiting. So we were amping up for this waiting process. And 2 weeks after our paperwork was approved for adoption, we got an email from a birth mother who told us that she was pregnant with a little boy and that she had chosen us to be his parents, and that she was due 2 weeks later. So we thought it was going to take no time, and then we had 2 weeks to make this life-changing decision.
And Thomas and I process differently. We're probably unique in that regard. No married couples
are ever
opposite on things. But I was like, I immediately, tears, yes, I think this is what we're walking into. Even though there were a host of unknowns. We had no idea if and when he would come home. There were a lot of uncertainties. And Thomas's process was a little different, but it led us in a beautiful direction.
Yeah, when we got that letter, it was such a shock to the system, thinking we were, going with the smaller agency, and then this is going to take a little bit longer, and we'll have time to kind of figure this out because, a natural pregnancy and parenthood, you kind of feel like it just falls in your lap, and it's easy to say, well, this is what's supposed to be, and making the choice to adopt just felt so foreign, and so when we got that notification, my head just started spinning, and I wanted to know a concrete answer. Wanted to know what is the right thing to do. How do I know that this decision is what we're supposed to do? And so I just started praying, and I was like, God, I want an answer. And I would do the whole thing of like, okay, God, you want me to be a dad, and pray this direction, and think maybe I'll get the goosebumps, and they'll be like, yes, that's the right choice, or maybe this is too soon and we need to wait, God, and hoping for, little goosebumps that direction, and trying to figure out like what's the right thing. And in all that praying, I just sensed this other thought come in my head that was not mine, and God was saying, I will be with you. And I was like, what do you mean you'll be with me? And it was him saying, putting the ball back in my court, and he says, the choice is yours. And if you choose to love this kid, I will be with you. It'll be hard. I'm pretty sure most kids grow up to be teenagers, and I've taught teenagers, and so I'm like, this is going to be hard. I know it's going to be hard, and he was saying, I will be with you. He's not saying it's going to be smooth, it's going to be great, but I'll be with you. And if this is too much, if this is too fast, and you have to say, oh, we have to pass, it's just too soon, I felt like he was saying, I will be with you. And what a sweet promise that was. And as some of you know, that's not the first time God's made that promise. In fact, in Isaiah 41:10, he says, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And this proved to be such an important promise for us, because as things progressed, Judah did not come home in 2 weeks after he was born. And even in those 2 weeks of waiting time, there was so many back and forths of legal issues with the birth father and back and forth. And through it all, his birth mother was wonderful. She kept calling us his parents, and that was really, really sweet. But there was a lot of back and forth. And then he was born, and it was wonderful. And then still, we had to go through what was going to be an interim family. And so Judah was going to go home with another family, and we had to make a choice. The agency came to us and said, a lot of parents in these situations decide to wait to engage with the baby, to try and to spend time, because it might not work out. You might not get to bring Judah home ever, and so this can be really hard on the families. And we had to decide how are we going to move forward in that times of uncertainty.
Yeah, it was crazy. I remember getting asked, what has this process been like for you? And I was like, I think adoption, the best way to describe it, it's like riding a roller coaster blindfolded. It's like equal parts exhilarating and then like vomit-inducing terror at the same time, where it's like incredible and amazing, and then you have no idea what's coming. And so that was what kept happening for us with Judah. It was one day we would get news of this happening, and okay, maybe he'll come home sooner, and then the next day we would get news that whole plan went out the window and it was going to take exceptionally longer. And so I think for us, there was not a promise from God, yes, this is going to happen. And I remember thinking, gosh, that was such a merciful thing for God to do. Because if God had said yes, and then we're sitting here in this season of waiting, I know my inclination would be to like shake my fists at God and go, but you said yes, and this is why is this happening? Why are we going through this? And so for God to say, I am with you, I just remember when I was in like the darkest sorrow, feeling like God goes, I'm in this too. Mm-hmm. Like I'm in this process with you as well. So when the lights are off and it feels really uncertain, that's where God is as well. And so through that season as well, I remember praying and thinking, I'm not above praying for a miracle, so I'd love to have Judah home before Christmas. So I started praying, and I also heard the voice of God in that moment, and I felt like the Lord said, what if my miracle looks different from your miracle? And so my head and my heart shifted in that moment, and I started asking those questions. So if my miracle looks like having my son home before Christmas, what if God's miracle is restoring Judah's birth family? And that process takes a lot longer. What if God's miracle is bringing more people to salvation? What if God's miracle means something opposite of what my expectations and desires are? And so those two, I think, words from the Lord were ultimately him tethering us to his sustenance, saying, I am with you, and I am in the business of making miracles. And so leave all of that hard stuff up to me and just trust me. And so we went back and forth, and we just had no idea how long we were going to wait. And so we were in this season basically of waiting and kind of wondering if God would perform a miracle and what that would look like.
Yeah, and that became really a way for us to pray, and it blew up our perspective of wanting to have blinders on, of thinking the best miracle in the world is that he comes home the fastest possible. And so that question, what if God's miracle is not what you want? We also found parallels in God's plan, and that the season of Advent and what we experience and celebrate at the time of Christmas, that the Messiah, the King of Kings, the waiting one, the promised one that these Israelites were waiting for, came in the form of this infant baby. And then as he grew and matured and started teaching, I'm sure there had to have been people going, but this miracle's not the one we wanted, right? We wanted to get the occupying Romans out of here. We wanted to be vindicated. We want to, show the world, God, your strength and your power and your might, and yet he kind of flipped it on its head. And Jesus ended up being the miracle that they didn't want, but the miracle that was the best possible outcome. And so there must have been, for a lot of people that had been studying the scriptures and been following the religion of Judaism, thinking, what is going on? Why does it look so different? It still feels like we're unsure of what things are going to be. And they wanted to know, what is this kingdom going to look like with an infant king, the way he came? And Jesus describes the new kingdom many times, but I love the way he does it so succinctly. In John 13:34, he says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. And it came down to this choice, and this love that God brought through Jesus was not meant just for the Israelites. This love was meant for the entire world, all of humanity. And he blew up that perspective, that kind of blinders on perspective. And so for us, the choice to love Judah before we knew him was riddled with uncertainty and questions. But ultimately, that choice made space in our lives for this holy disruption of love. And that with this new command, there is a new promise as well. And it says in 1 John 4:16, God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. And so Jesus says, love one another, and that seems impossible at times. But again, what he says is, I am with you because I am love. God is love, and that's the command, and that seems to be the promise. And it was that choosing to love that really carried us through that difficult time.
Yeah, I remember that season too of not knowing, and kind of going back to the ministry. They told us, a lot of families, especially now, because this process might take, they said maybe up to 6 months or a year. And so we were given a choice. Do we want to see Judah once a week for an hour and a half for as long as it takes? Or do we want to just wait until we have a more certain understanding of when he's going to come home? And as we're processing through what this love looks like for us, we thought, would we regret it more not getting to know this little boy and him getting to know us? And that feeling of going and seeing him every week for an hour and a half and then leaving him, that anguish that we felt every time we left, Would we regret that path of love? Or would we regret more that self-preservation and protecting ourselves now, and then when he comes home, however much longer down the road, we have no idea who each other is? Or the possibility that we love him and he may never come home. And so we decided to take that risk because we knew we were connected and tethered to the source of love itself. And so if we were choosing love, that love was not going to run out. Back in December, I remember kind of in the lowest point for me, it was between when we were there in the hospital when Judah was born and between when we were going to get to see him again. There was, I think, 11 or 12 days of waiting between seeing him again. And I'd love to share just this little journal entry with you, and it kind of sums up some of these conversations around Advent. I wrote, "We wait in hopeful anticipation. We pray with reverence and expectation. We take deep breaths and long pauses, knowing that Advent is upon us." Latin Adventus meant coming or appearance. For those who follow the Advent calendar, it is a time for waiting and fasting. A soon, but not yet. I feel this every day in my body. I long for the son we held 11 days ago. I long for the promise of motherhood. I long for the satisfaction and fulfillment of a vision from the Lord. Soon, but not yet. Soon, but not yet. God, give me the patience to wait for your promise, to feel the ache of fasting and the hope of what's to come. And I remember in those darker days feeling like God is increasing our capacity, not only to love, but to have faith, that in the waiting, he is still there. This is a reading from an Advent book that I have. I think we've maybe got it for you. Advent is a season characterized by watching, waiting, patience, prayer, longing, and expectation. Advent is a season of deliberate tension. We remember the messianic longing of Israel, and we give thanks for and celebrate the birth of the Messiah. But we look into our own hearts, and we look around at our broken world, and we recognize that all is not as it should be. The peace on earth promised by the angels has yet to be fully realized, and Advent is the time to ache for the day when all will be made right. And so if you find yourself in a season, as we did in that moment, where things did not feel right, this season was a time for us to understand and participate in that waiting. And so we're no longer waiting for the Messiah. What I love on this side of it is that we're promised the presence of God. And that's what God gave Thomas in that word, I am with you. So we're no longer waiting for God to show up. God's shown up and he's given us that promise. So about three and a half months into this waiting and this back and forth, we got a phone call and they told us that Judah was coming home. And I think we had just started coming to church. It was like maybe the beginning of February, and we sat with the Davises that first Sunday, and they're like, so do you have anything to pray about? And we're like, we're waiting for a baby. And we're like weeping, like we're new here. Gosh, we just felt so welcomed in. And then when we brought him home and were able to come back and celebrate his homecoming with you, it was really beautiful to watch how God not only celebrates or weeps with us, but he celebrates with us. And again, a lot of friends ask, what's it like to have him home? What was that experience like? And I said, I think for me, what I realized most in that season was there was this other chamber in my heart that I didn't have access to until I became a parent. And so I think I was always afraid, like, am I going to have enough love to give? And God's kind of like, because he knows, like, he's designed us for this extra capacity of love for, like, the first kid and the second kid and however many kids we have. I'm assuming.
That's what.
Right? The more come, the more love, And so I just feel like there's this endless supply of love, and I'm so thankful I didn't have access to it before Judah, because I probably would have squandered it on something way less incredible. And so God gives us that capacity, and we are tethered to his love, and I'm thankful for that realization.
Man, and it's something that it is unique that happened when we were with him when he was born. And I'd like to share briefly a little journal entry of my own, because I felt like God was doing something similar with my heart as well. Let me just get this.
We're just getting real vulnerable here, sharing our journal entries with you guys.
Make sure we take this home with us.
Diving in.
And a unique thing too was that Judah ended up being born. His due date was Thanksgiving, and he ended up being born on the first Sunday of Advent. And so it was a really special thing. And so the season is also very, very special for us. But so it says, Sunday morning unlocked something in me. I picked up Judah and elevated my capacity for love. He was this tiny, precious little boy, unrelated to me and a complete stranger to anyone, with not even a connection to his blood family, not even knowing their last name. I accepted him as my own. I chose to love him. The human heart is capable of an insane amount of love, and this can be applied to grown humans too, not just infants. And only with the work of the Holy Spirit can we also apply that love to a neighbor and enemy. But now that my heart is awakened, God, I ask for you to complete the work you started in me. Make me love my enemies. Make me love the one who hurts me, the one who hates me. And I felt like after hearing the message of Jesus, the impossible message of love your enemies, to sit in that room and to feel such connection to this child who, in any other reason, I don't have a reason to be connected with. It made me think about his command to love. And I thought, God, if you can do this, if we can tap into that extra source of love, who is God, there must be space. There must be space. And we're going to do it imperfectly because, man, that kid is cute, but he takes forever to eat. And he frustrates me. And we do it imperfectly, but never once do I doubt that I love him. And I'm always coming back. And I'll apologize when I get things wrong and it's messy. But I felt like what was special in that story is for us to be able to understand and find out there is this extra compartment. There is this extra cheat code that God has given us, and it's him. And his promise is, I will be with you. The outcomes, we don't know. We don't get to control those things. And his miracle might not be what we want. He is with us in the waiting. He is with us in the grief, in the celebration, in the questions. And that promise, I am with you, and that God is love, makes the commandment and the calling and the promise one and the same. That love is both the calling and the promise. That he is love and he's with us.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. My mind is just going 100 miles a minute on different things. That tension of now and not yet is all through Scripture, and it's all about the kingdom, or that tension of, I promise you this, but now you got to wait for it. Is incredibly difficult from that. The idea of a miracle we want not being the miracle that we really need. Years ago, I read a book by Patrick Morley, and I don't even know if he's still alive, or I never read any of the book, but he said in that book, there's a God we want, there's a God we need, and they are not the same God. And so this idea of, it's a greater miracle to go with you through something than to promise that he's going to get you out of it. I mean, that's the greater miracle in and of itself. But then just the whole idea of adoption is, as you're talking and sharing your experience, it's like, okay, God as this parent who was willing to give up his child, so the birth parent had this love for their child, not for a better life, and so on that end, God has given up his child. And the Bible says that we're adopted into his family, right? We're not, and adoption's a choice, all that, but yet I'm thinking, okay, God is like this, he gave his son, but now he's wanting to adopt back, but he's not sure if it's going to happen or not. That, he's kind of that, now he's sovereign, I know he knows all that, so don't overthink this, but it's like, okay, I want to adopt Kevin, but I'm not sure Kevin's ready.
It's a big risk that he takes with all of us.
It's a huge risk, yes. But then this choosing to love, which is what adoption is. I mean, you choose to give your heart. And I've walked with adoption through parents who have had, at the very end, something happens and they lose, And so, but that capacity to love, and then the thing that God is saying, this is how we're supposed to love. Yeah. That risk. It's a risk to love. It's a huge risk to love your enemies. Yeah. It's a risk to step out and love someone without any promise or guarantee that they're going to love you back or they're going to respect you back. In fact, they may reject you, they may betray you, but yet that's what Jesus did. That's what God did through that. And the idea of waiting, I remember with you guys going through that, not on the same plane, but just, is it finalized yet? Well, we're not sure yet. Well, this may happen. Well, we don't know. And it's just, wow, but then to think that's how God loves us. So thank you for sharing. She's going to sing a song, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to get out of the way. I don't want to stand right here beside you. You don't want me to sing with you, do you? No, you don't. You don't want that.
It's ad lib.
And after she sings, we'll say our prayer together.
So I've been a songwriter for, I guess, about a decade now, and Thomas is a math teacher, so I've never asked to visit his classroom, although I should have. But he did say, I wonder what it would be like to write a song, and so he got to sit in on a songwrite a few years ago, and so we actually wrote this song together, and before we started the process of adoption, but maybe right after we started trying to have a family, and so this song actually really kind of carried me through that season of waiting. And so it's a song, if you feel like singing along, you're welcome to. If you feel like you just need to let it be sung over you, that's good as well. Oh, restless heart, do not grow weary. Hold on to faith and wait. The God of love, He will not tarry, no, He is never late. Oh, restless heart, do not grow weary, hold on to faith and wait. The God of love, He will not tarry, no, He is never late. So I wait in the promise, I wait in hope. Yes, I wait in the power of God's unending love. Be still and rest, secure my soul. He knows what's best for me. In my patience lies the goal, to wait and trust in Thee. So I wait in the promise, I wait in hope. Yes, I wait in the power of God's unending love. Even through my imperfections, His light is shining through. Though dim, I am still a reflection of mercy and of truth. So I wait in the promise, I wait in hope. Yes, I wait in the power of God's unending love. Would you sing that with me? I wait in the promise, I wait in hope. Yes, I wait in the power of God's unending love, of God's unending, of God's unending love. One last time. Of God's unending love. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.